Hi everyone, you're listening to the Vialucci podcast, uncensored and completely unedited discussions about life and everything in it. We hope you enjoy the show.
Andrew Lownie.
Hi everyone.
Hello. It's become a thing. Whenever I meet somebody and that's the first time I've heard that surname, I ask them, do you know, does it mean anything? Have you traced it back? Lownie?
Yes, it's called Lownie.
Lownie.
It comes from Scotland. So,
Lownie.
yeah, it's Scottish.
Oh, Kirby. Where's Kirby? And Charles Kirby. Where's that from?
I think there's a Kirby.
Is it Kirby Press? That rings a bell.
And there's a Kirby.
Kirby Grip.
Kirby Grip. Yeah.
What were the toys? Those tiny little toy Kirby.
There is a Kirby, also the Nintendo character.
Oh, so you're part of a
video game
dynasty,
series. It is a village or a small town in Ireland, and also there is a Kirby outside of Liverpool, I believe, as well.
Kirby, yeah, you're
Kirby
right. Yeah.
Lonsdale up in the Lake District.
Okay, right.
Oh, okay. Right, so the book, Traitor King. So how many books have you done now? 3?
This is, I did a biography of a writer called John Buchan, a spy called Guy Burgess,
Oh,
a book
oh,
on
right,
the
yeah.
Mountbattens,
The Mountbatten, yeah.
and then Traitor King, and I'm now doing Andrew and Fergie. So that's my third.
You're doing
book.
you're going
Royal
into that
Marriages.
territory.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it's you're sort of slowly sort of catching up with the
I'm
sort
just
of
getting more and
current
more
events.
commercial.
Yeah.
You can't go wrong with royal books, with what I call rogue royals.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, somebody I knew that I was speaking to. I said I'm speaking to this guy here, and he said, "Oh, I've read the Mountbatten one." He works for British Airways, and because he started telling me, "Oh yeah, I know the thing," blah. And I said, "How do you know it?" And because he works for British Airways on the flights, he's the manager. He said that, and I love when companies do things right. They have to learn about the royal family as part of the job for
BA.
And I thought that's great. I mean, I don't know anything about the way the business is or anything, but I thought that makes sense that the British Airways, I think it's mostly run by Qatar, the company, so it's not really British Airways. But
Well, that's a little strange because I mean I get it if you join Chelsea Football Club as a football player, like it's useful to have some kind of context.
It was not
and
needed.
Or the royal flight. But yes.
but
The chances of getting a royal on your flight in BA are probably pretty remote, I think.
No, funny enough, then he started telling me all the
They
stories.
all go EasyJet now.
Which surprised me.
Okay, is that just a sort of optics?
I think it's an optics thing.
Yeah.
Meghan goes private jet and
Yeah.
the royal family go EasyJet.
He said he's had summer royals on there, and he said, I think it's when they want to be like low, not seen for some reason, they go on. There's a structure of how private individuals can fly without not being known. But anyway,
I think
they're all
I've
business class.
noticed that if I got on like an EasyJet flight to like Ibiza or something,
no, there's a
and then
process.
there's like Fergie in the background, a bit of a front, trying to keep a low profile. I think it'd be like, is that Fergie?
Well, they sort of dress up so you can't give false names and things.
Oh, really? Okay.
There's a woman sitting, with a scarf on the whole way through and dark glasses. Yeah, that's probably Fergie.
Yeah. No, he said there's an actual process with British. If you don't want to be known, you won't be known. It happens with politicians. He said a lot of politicians fly, but he said Boris Johnson flew. And we're not allowed, and there's things that only certain people, and he has to go on first before the staff get on.
Yeah.
And he said he was really rude. He said, like, he was telling you, you've got to sit down. Like, it's a serious thing. The plane cannot get for any reason. And he was just going, oh, don't be silly. And like, he said, we can't really, because they will sort of give you the boot if you. But yeah, so anyway.
I'll be arrested and thrown off the plane, yeah.
There's a woman recently, and we'll get to your book in a second.
Batten's required reading for BA. That would be brilliant. Brilliant endorsement. Yeah.
That was him, yes. So he knew all about it. But a woman got on. She'd been for a flight. I think it was Hungary. And she'd had bum implants. I'm sorry, Andrew. I've just realised I should have. But it is what it is.
Oh.
I've just realised maybe I should have brought this up with you here. But she'd had bum implants, and she was standing up when they was taking off. And he said, "You have to sit down." And the woman said, "No, the doctor said it would be fine if I fly." He said, "Yeah, you fly, but you can't sit. You can't stand up when we're taking off. That's the thing." So she had to sit down, and they burst. So they had to divert the plane. And I don't know if I must have said this before, but he said, if you divert a plane, it costs £10 million, which wipes out the profit of that plane, plus fines, because they have to clear space from about 5 or 6 different airlines, and you have to pay them a fine, plus the air fine for having to divert.
I've got I
10
won't
million.
get into it now, but
Yeah,
I've
go
got
on.
a story about where I was on a flight that was nearly diverted. So
For Wales?
no, well, we were flying back from Marrakesh.
Yeah,
It was nearly diverted. So
it was.
no, we nearly, but I had
Oh.
to talk the pilots. I had a conversation with the pilot and asked him not to divert because he wanted to stop at Paris. We were supposed to be flying to Gatwick.
Yeah.
we will get.
Yeah. Go. Yeah.
So we're supposed to be going Gatwick. My friend got very ill on the flight, and they were like, we're going to land in Paris.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't want to go to Paris.
I don't want to go to Paris.
No, because what the hell am I going to do in a French hospital with my friend, just not being able to speak French, you know, and like his dad's waiting for us to pick us up. Like,
but he was dying.
Yeah, kind of. But I thought it was better just to get to England, just to get, because it's family there. We get an English hospital, just get sorted. Right. Travel insurance a bit iffy, might not cover it all. So I just
you took the risk on his behalf.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, for an extra 40 minutes on the.
I suppose not.
But literally, the pilot came down, sat next to me, and says, "Right, well, we're going to stop. We're going to divert to Paris." And I said, "No." It's like, no. I think we should go to. I think we should press on and go to Gatwick. And he's like, "I don't think so. I don't think we should." And I was like, "Well." I said, I don't. What the hell am I going to do in a French thing? Not being able to speak French, and like them asking me like questions about him and like his, why he's ill and like his treatment and stuff. I'd be like, I don't. It's mental. So
well, there's a load of things I could tell you about. But anyway, we'll get to your book. So the Traitor King. So here's my thing. I'm not educated. I don't know about the royals and things like that. So I thought I was going to struggle until I listened to you communicate it well in other interviews and things you've done. And the one thing I loved, I mean, even before this show, I was having a go at modern media, just the laziness of it. And when in one of the interviews you explain that most researchers are researching other people's research, and you actually go into the documents, being a historian, you actually go and search through the things yourself. And I thought, you don't hear that anymore. You don't get that. So I was very pleased to hear that.
Well, I think most people also who write about royal biography tend to rely on not just the cuts, but any contacts they've got in the royal household.
Right.
And they tend to, of course, steer it towards a very pro view. I mean, the other thing that struck me, I mean, having read round this a lot in the past, was it was pretty obvious he was a Nazi. Yeah, but no one was prepared to draw that.
It's one of those things no one says it's.
They provided the evidence, even the official book provided it all, and then said no, he wasn't a Nazi. But this particular writer did a book on the Mountbattens and did the same thing there. He said there's no evidence that he was bisexual, and yet there was plenty of evidence.
Yeah.
So,
but I mean, when it's a Traitor King, I'm so used to people just throwing things out there. But I thought he's probably had sympathies for, and you go, oh no, it was like he properly. I mean, when you say he was a Nazi, you go, well, there's not much more he could have done other than kill people. But no, he was a proper like.
I had a very low opinion of him just from sort of reading and having a bit of knowledge, but
it's even lower now.
Yes. Honestly, I was still kind of shocked, to be honest, at some of the details. I was like, oh, he was really callous. It wasn't just sort of like, oh, I don't know, those chaps in Germany have sure got the trains running on time, or those autobahns look pretty spiffy, or however they spoke.
Well, he was anti-Semitic, like Hitler to the end of his life, believed in the Führerprinzip.
And that's what I didn't
said to people, come and bomb Britain. That's the best way to subjugate them.
That's why I was thinking, this isn't like it's picking up on something in him that might be a bit. That's what I couldn't understand. That because he survived. I thought he'd like die around that time, but no, he carried on as if like nothing happened. Like he just seemed to get on with.
It was a huge cover-up. I mean, no one wanted the story to come out, so they tried to suppress all the evidence or spin it. And it's the same story now. And one of my arguments in all my books is our history is censored. We're presented with this idealized view because the documents are not released or destroyed, and they find tame biographers. We see this with Meghan Markle and Scobie and others. They put their own version of events, and the job of the historian is, of course, to try and tell the truth about the past.
Because all I knew about them was the map,
love affair.
And
it's not a great love affair.
So I thought, well, there's no bigger story. It's only when I listened to you talking about it, I thought, oh, that was one of the worst marriages that could be. Yeah. So was that was crafted then?
Well, I mean, he was obsessed with her. He never really properly grew up emotionally or physically, and he just liked dominant women who bossed him around. So the ruder and more awful she was to him, the more he loved it. He went to bed in tears, and that was, he was pleased.
And how did they get together?
They met at a hunting weekend in 1931.
Yeah.
And I think part of the attraction, again, a bit like Meghan for Harry, is that, I mean, she was a sort of very ambitious American woman, but she didn't defer to him.
Right.
She complained. She treated him like a normal person, and no one else did that, and particularly then. So that was part of the attraction.
Yeah.
And she dominated him right from the very beginning, and that's what he wanted. He always had slightly older women as mistresses, and he was the boy, and they were the mother.
And she was having affairs.
Well, I think the extraordinary thing is that his father arranged for him to be put under surveillance by MI5 and her, because they thought she was a bit of an adventuress.
Right.
And that revealed during this great romance that both of them were having affairs with other people at the same time. One with her with a car, as a used car salesman, and him with an Austrian princess. And all the way through their lives, they had affairs. Her more than him.
Yeah.
But even within months of their marriage, she was having an affair with the American ambassador in Paris.
And you say she was very dominant to him. How was he towards her? Did he admire her? Did he? What was the?
Oh well, he thought she was perfect.
He did,
I mean, she was not a very attractive woman.
Really?
But I think she was witty. She, I think, took care of him, which is what he wanted.
Yeah.
I think she was pretty cold to him, but like his mother. But that he didn't seem to mind that.
Yeah.
And bossed him around. No one could quite work out what the attraction was. It was bizarre.
And I assumed all royals were educated, but you make the point of no, he was actually quite simple. He wasn't really.
Well, I mean, he was sent to Oxford, but I mean, he did no work. He was very, very stupid, had no real hinterland in terms of the arts. I mean, he asked about a piece of music and was told it was by Mozart and said, has he written anything else?
Anything else, yeah.
So he had no interest in an inner life.
Right.
He liked gardening and gossip and
what about all these what did he do in the army?
Well, he couldn't really fight in the First World War,
Yeah.
so he pretended he went to the front and he was given a military cross for gallantry, but in fact he was kept safe the whole time. And he traded on this as that he'd been a soldier, but he wasn't. It was all part of the myth that was created around him. Like there was a myth that he cared about the miners in Wales. He couldn't care less about anyone except going to nice dances.
Did you want to say something?
I was going to say, yeah, that's quite a common thing, isn't it, with royals, though, so that they do their bits of military service. Sometimes it's quite small, sometimes it's a bit bigger, but it's kind of just so that they can sort of have their medals and sort of.
Well, no, I mean, I think a lot of them did do more than that. I mean, clearly Harry and William have served for a time, but it's a good discipline. It keeps you protected from the wider society. It teaches, I think, all sorts of life skills. And of course, the royal family, the royal services report in effect to the royal family. They serve the sovereign, and so it's very important the sovereign should have been part of the armed services. So there's Charles. He went through all three services as part of his training.
I think it's a modern thing. It's a modern thing where they know people's eyes are on you a bit more. Whereas 50 years ago, you could just say what you wanted, and that's what happened.
Well, his father had been in the Navy, George V. His brother Bertie was at Jutland, so there was a very strong naval tradition, and of course Mountbatten, who was a cousin, had a very distinguished naval career.
Has he got a bit of the Andrew about him?
I think there was a lot of connections. Yes, he liked playing golf.
Yeah.
The difference is that Duke drank and Andrew doesn't, but there's certain parallels.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know he didn't drink. You think he would, growing up amongst all the. Yeah,
not really excessively, but you got to have a few vices. Because I just always think, if you don't do something, have a flutter every now and then, a gamble, or
It's not a vice.
Occasionally a smoke, occasionally a
vice.
cigar or whatever on Christmas. But I'm just slightly suspicious. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because it's like with Donald Trump doesn't drink, but his brother was an alcoholic.
Yeah.
So I thought if you say I don't drink, there's usually something that means. Was there anything to say why he didn't drink?
Why Andrew doesn't drink? He doesn't like the taste.
No, I suppose that's fair enough. Before the traitor bit, was there a love story there? Even in the early days? Was that just all
I don't think there
concocted?
was. I think she was happy to be part of the royal circles, happy to be his mistress. He introduced her to people. He showered her with jewels. Her husband, sort of, Ernest Simpson, sort of put up with it. It helped him in his own career. So he sort of laid down his wife for the monarch.
Right.
And the whole thing just got out of hand.
Right.
She thought she would be a plaything and discarded, and he became obsessed with her.
So he fell for her, and
he was determined to have her, and so she wanted to get away, and he threatened to kill himself if she disappeared. And so she was stuck with him.
Would have. Yeah.
I mean, you get a feel for it now, but she's when that runs out, when the sort of the glitz of the monarch title starts to run out,
she was trapped, and I think that's why she felt angry with him, and she took that frustration out on him.
And
the irony is that the more she took that out on him, the more he loved it.
Yeah,
and he felt guilty. He realised that she had sacrificed her life for him. Of course, he'd sacrificed his life for her, and that sort of joined them against the world. I
was desperate to have a little bit of. Because there was love there. I thought, well, he loved, so there must something in him. But then when you were saying stories about, who was it? The butler somebody had died. He had to go to the funeral, and he said you could only have a certain amount of time off. And he said, well, if you leave, you can't come back.
Yes, well, I mean, the butler who'd been with them for 30 years, his wife died, and he needed to go home early to take care of his kids. And Wallace said, if you go early, then don't bother coming back. I mean, and they were appalling to their staff. They didn't pay them properly. They thought it was an honour to work for them.
Yeah.
They were, for example, borrowing jewels and dresses and not returning them. They charged to go to parties.
Yeah.
They charged, they made a lot of money from charging for interviews, charging to be photographed. They were very venal.
It's that sort of Trump personality. Like, I've got, but I want more, and I'll.
Well, it's a hustle.
Yeah.
It seems to be that they were on a grift.
Well,
they were looking to monetize.
They lived very extravagantly. I mean, they had 3 chauffeurs, only 2 of the household of 30 staff for 2 of them. They needed the money to come in. They lived with or moved in circles of very rich people in Palm Beach and Long Island, and to keep up with these people, and they're entertaining every night. They had to bring in money, and that's but they were freeloaders most of the time, so people paid to take them on cruises. They got free trips across the Atlantic on ocean liners. They never picked up a bill in the restaurant. When they went anywhere, they stayed with people rather than hotels. So they knew how to play the system.
Very expensive to those that can't afford it, free to those that can.
Yes, exactly. All those upgrades in British Airways.
So they'd gone to live in America.
Well, they spent, after the war, no one wanted them. So they spent half the time in France, where they had tax status, which meant they saved paying tax, and then the other half they spent in the States. And they had an apartment in the Waldorf Astoria in New York, and they traveled around seeing people in Florida.
And were they sort of welcomed by the Americans? Was it a thing then?
Yeah, a bit like Meghan and Harry. The Americans were much more. They saw them as royalty. They saw them as glamorous. They often won awards for the best dressed person of the year. They brought glamour, but they mixed with some pretty dodgy businessmen and people. A lot of hangers-on, people who sucked up, who liked the idea of being with royals. Real royals, real European aristocracy shunned them because they thought they were tacky.
Right. Oh, God, you can't really do anything about that, can you?
And the Nazi thing as well.
I'm putting that up for
a bit of a shadow, doesn't it?
Well, exactly. Even when they wanted to go back to France, the line was that all their friends were collaborationists, and it didn't think it would look very good.
Yeah. When did it start to be known, his thoughts? Was it as Hitler rose to power?
Well, he even before he came to power as king, he was known to be sympathetic. He had been targeted by the Nazis.
What were his German connections? He did speak German.
Well, he spoke German. He was 16th, 18th German. His mother was a German princess. He had lots of German cousins, many of whom were Nazi generals, and they were used to target him and come across and try and persuade Britain to come into an alliance with Germany, even in 1935. And so this was a concern in government circles, that he was interfering in politics. He was also very pro-Nazi, and clearly there was a policy then of appeasement, and that we could deal with the Nazis. But even by 35, 36, it was pretty clear what was going on in Nazi Germany. And he continued to do that. So he interfered, for example, in the Anglo-German Naval Agreement of 1935. He tried to play down the remilitarization of the Rhineland in March 1936. So I argue that one of the reasons that they wanted to get rid of him wasn't the love affair. They used that as an excuse. The real concern was this political interfering. And then it continued. He went and did this trip around Germany in October 1937, where he inspected SS guards and met all the Nazi leaders. It was pretty clear. This was very embarrassing for the British. So he was very, very open about it. He even broadcast to the Germans on the eve of the Second World War. So it wasn't just appeasement. It was a pro-Nazi view. And in fact, when he was sent off to the Bahamas to keep him out of the way after Churchill threatened to court-martial him, even then they had to keep him away from America because he was trying to get involved with the isolationists and keep America out of the war.
So he can be court-martialed. I never really understand the power between the state and the royals.
Well, it wasn't as a royal. He had military rank as a major general. And the prime minister could of course, he'd broken, I mean, he had broken the Treachery Act, which is communicating with the enemy during the war in code. So there were lots of things they could have done. I mean, unfortunately, that they discovered only after the end of the war. And the last thing they could do was put on trial or execute a former sovereign.
Yeah.
But the fact is, people were executed for far less than he did.
Yeah. Executed as well. So that was still on the table. Yeah, so what sort of things was he doing then? He was actually communicating with them, even 37th, but he was the things about bombing London.
Well, I mean, the Germans had targeted him. They were pretty annoyed that he'd been, in a sense, there'd been a putsch against him in effect, and he wasn't king because they'd lost their main hope. But they kept the pressure on him. And so when he was hoping to come back to Britain after the invasion of France, the Germans targeted him. But of course, we'd already had a moment where he betrayed the French war defences to the Germans through a German agent called Charles Beddoes. So he'd already committed one act of treachery in the spring of 1940.
That's literal. That's not a...
How? In what way was that?
Well, his job was he was given this what they thought was a sinecure to inspect the French defences, and he wrote reports on them and their weaknesses. But he passed that material not just to the British, who were interested to know what's going on, but also to Charles Beddoes. And Charles Beddoes, we know from documentation, passed it back to the German ambassador in The Hague, and they passed it back to Ribbentrop in Berlin. So, I mean, clearly the Germans may have had other sources, but it certainly was quite a thing. But then when he got to Portugal and was waiting to be brought back to Britain, the Germans approached him and said, look, will you come back if we invade Britain, as we were hoping to do, as puppet king? And he didn't report that to the authorities. He didn't say, get lost. He entertained this notion for several weeks, going in and out of the German embassy, talking to them, saying that the most effective way of subjugating Britain was to bomb it, including his brother in Buckingham Palace. So I think it's very clear, and from the documentation that's been produced and found, much of it, of course, has been destroyed and weeded, but that he was a traitor to this country.
I was going to ask you about that. What sort of information and sort of primary sources are available? Because I'm assuming a lot of it was under the Official Secrets Act. Has that recently become available?
Yes, I mean the main source are what's called the captured German documents, or the Marburg or Windsor file. At the end of the war, the Germans thought they should burn all their papers before the Allies came. But a man called von Losch, who'd been at Oxford, decided this was his calling card to get out to the West. So he arranged for the boxes to be burned, but not the files. He buried them in the forest outside Marburg, and then led Americans to them at the end of the war.
A sort of bargaining
chip. And this, of course, was very, very useful. The British, when they heard about it, were absolutely appalled and tried to persuade the Americans to destroy this material. But and the correspondence with Eisenhower and others. From Churchill. But the American historians vowed that this stuff should be kept as historical, it should be used at Nuremberg trials. And so that's the material, but we have it from private diaries. The files here were weeded. So, for example, when he went to the Bahamas, the Colonial Office files here are very thin, but what they didn't know was that they're mirror copies of those files in the Bahamas. And so you can see what the original files had. So often it's what you find stuff in other files, what we call in adjacent files. Things are copied into other departments and they haven't weeded those. I found stuff, for example, in the Portuguese archives, in French archives, because both the Portuguese and the French also had him under surveillance, FBI files, freedom of information requests. If you work your way around the files, the stuff is there. There's a paper trail, but it just is a long, involved business.
Yeah. And I said overseas as well. You forget you can go overseas to get information because they were looking back at him from over there.
Well, the FBI had him under surveillance. Right. They had files, and people who dealt with him have private papers. There was several attempts to blackmail him, and those accounts are in private diaries with the FBI files. So there is stuff around. Yeah. Ironically, one of the best sources was the Royal Archives, and those have only recently been opened. I was the first person to see his file. First person. I saw some stuff this week on the abdication, which no one else has seen, and everyone assumed these files would be closed forever. So stuff was left there, which was quite sensitive. So, for example, some of those German files that we thought were destroyed, actually there were copies. George VI was monitoring his brother and his treacherous activities. And so, ironically, one of the best sources is actually in the Royal Archives.
Was it known at the time, like in would a normal person would know of this, or was it very held down? Well, because if you're talking about court-martialing somebody, I mean, did people know?
No, in government circles, people were suspicious and knew and reported back. And in fact, his private detective was also sending back reports, special branch officer to special branch.
Right.
But the first, and it's clear from looking at the files in the Royal Archives, the royal family were monitoring this the whole time. So again, it sheds a new light on their attitudes to him. It wasn't so much the betrayal of the abdication, it was the betrayal of the country.
Right.
But George VI was briefed about these German documents as he came off the balcony on VE Day in May 1945.
Right.
They didn't want to spoil his day beforehand. Yeah. The people in the establishment knew, political circles knew, royal circles knew, but no one in the population really knew until 1957 when some of this material was published, but they spun it, they downplayed it, they said that it was all made up by the Germans. All these German ambassadors filing reports saying the same thing, but they made it up. And it's the way they discredit things now. They
fake news even back then.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they did they live in Windsor? I mean, I suppose they must have Windsor Castle. Or was that just the title?
When the king, he was made Duke of Windsor when he abdicated in December 36. But the deal was that he would go into exile. He wouldn't come back. They didn't want him upstaging his brother. He, in fact, had quite a lot of support among Mosley supporters, and they didn't want him to be a sort of focus for that.
Right.
But they also wanted Bertie a chance to begin to establish his own sort of identity and not have this older brother looking over his shoulder.
Yeah.
So that's why he was kept in France and America. So he never came back. He had a property in Windsor Great Park called Fort Belvedere, which was his pride and joy, and he was kept out of that. Wasn't allowed to come back to it.
What? So when did he leave for America? When was the last time he left England?
He went literally the day he abdicated in December 1936. Okay. He went to first of all, he went briefly to Austria while he waited for the divorce to come through for Wallace. They got married in France, and they lived in France really for the rest of their lives.
Oh.
And America was only post-war and only for, say, 6 months of the year. So their main home was always Paris.
And how old was he when he died then?
He died he's born in 1894 and he dies in 1972.
Oh, it's a fair old run.
Yeah.
72.
It's quite recent.
Yeah, I was going to say,
it's not, this isn't
the 70s.
I remember, it. And there are people who appeared in the television program who, one of them was a lodger with him in the 1940s.
Right.
But there are plenty of people who remember them from the 60s and 70s.
I mean, he was nearly old enough to see Jaws and Exorcist come out. I mean, that's how you put it in those
might see The Godfather.
Yes, who knows?
It doesn't seem a justice that he survived that long. I thought
Wallace lived until 1986.
Think of that. No,
okay.
So, I mean, he's only the Queen's uncle. I mean, it's really close.
Yeah.
He doesn't. I mean, if that photograph on the front, I mean, crack a smile. I mean, it's an important photograph, surely, but there just seems there's a vacancy.
Well, that's an official portrait, him as governor of the Bahamas. So, there's a wonderful picture in the book. Well, there's a wonderful picture in the book of him leaping up in the air. There was a photographer who said the best way to get pictures of people, I think it's right at the end, the best way to get pictures of people is them jumping in the air. And so that's a bit more sort of relaxing. There's a lot of stuff on YouTube about him. I mean, there's several quite important interviews, equivalent to Oprah, a man called Kenneth Harris. But it's very interesting, you watch it. He looks a rather pathetic figure, being bossed around by Wallace. And then when he's interviewed in his own, he comes to life a bit.
Oh, okay.
But there's so many parallels between Meghan and Wallace and him and Harry. The idea of the American divorcee taking the young charismatic prince, the debates about security and money,
staying out of the country.
And staying out of the country and separating you from your friends and suing the press and writing tame books.
Having a bossy wife.
Yeah, exactly. Having a bossy wife who's got her own ambitions. I mean, I think Meghan is clearly much more ambitious than Wallace. But it's almost like a sort of rerun of history.
I know, it just needs to come out that maybe, I don't know, that he's a secret Ku Klux Klan member or something, or white supremacist.
When
Harry?
Yeah.
When he leaves and he goes to France, is he cut off financially?
Well, he's given an allowance of £25,000 a year, which is what they would give any child of the monarch. But
what would that be now?
That would be a lot of money.
Over $1 million. 25,000.
Yes,
back then.
Yes,
buy a house of 3,000 or something.
Yeah.
So
I think I do have a scale. But I mean, what they discovered was he'd actually been saving a lot of money from the Duchy of Cornwall estates.
Oh, of course.
And so he had millions even then.
Yeah.
And he didn't need this annuity. So in fact, this annuity was going to be voted for by Parliament, and they realised it would be embarrassing if this merged, and so George VI paid for it. But he played hardball. For example, he had a life interest in Balmoral and Sandringham, and instead of just giving it to the new monarch, he insisted on being paid for that. He threatened to sell it to a syndicate of American businessmen. But he'd been giving jewels to Wallace even before they got married, millions of pounds of jewels.
Right.
And also jewels that he inherited from Queen Alexandra. So there was a real concern that the stuff was all leaving the royal family.
Yeah. Him growing up, what was his story growing up? Any extremes? What was the...
Well, I mean, he was the heir. Queen Victoria was still alive when he was born. Her son Edward VII came to the throne in 1901 till 1910. So he was growing up then. In 1910, he became the Prince of Wales. His father, George V, inherited. George V and Queen Mary were pretty distant parents, very old-fashioned. George VI was a bit of a bully, and all the children suffered. So Bertie, his brother, who became George VI, had a stammer. They
As in the King's Speech.
Exactly.
That fella. Okay, right.
But also, he was a popular prince, a bit like Harry. He was good looking, he was glamorous, and he was used to basically sell the monarchy in this period in the 1920s and 1930s. And then, of course, it all changed when he met Wallace. But, he'd had mumps at the age of 16, so he actually stopped growing physically. He had no body hair, for example. Right. He only shaved twice a week.
Yeah, I mean, he looks very boyish there. I mean, I don't know how old he is there, but that's incredibly young.
Well, there he's 50.
Doesn't look 50, and that's 50 at that age. That in those years, 50.
That's a 1930s.
He looked boyish.
Yeah,
he looked boyish. Yeah, he did, and he wrote these love letters to these mistresses in baby talk, really? And it was all baby
very
talk,
immature.
Very immature. He'd never really developed, and he was given. I mean, he had a reasonable education. I mean, he had tutors, and he went to Oxford, but he was only really interested in hunting, steeplechasing. In fact, they encouraged dangerous sports in the hope that would kill him, because the last thing they wanted was to have him come to power.
Have you got a nice PR move? Oh, he's dead. Let's have a ceremony.
Fancy jumping that very high. Very high thing. I bet you could. I guess I don't think that's dangerous. I bet you could. I bet you 50 quid. You could jump that.
When they went overseas, obviously they had their own money. Did they do anything specific? Were they head of anything, or did they?
Never had a job. I mean, apart
even
from being governor.
I can imagine her sort of.
Well, when he was governor of the Bahamas, they clearly had a role, and she did enter into her responsibilities. She worked for charities.
Right, I was going to say,
cooked on the canteen at the RAF base. So she found a sort of purpose in life during the Second World War. But then at the end of the war, he lobbied for jobs as an ambassador in America, and
so it's all political.
And no one wanted him because he thought he was a liability. He was indiscreet. He was a traitor. He wasn't very bright. He wasn't very dedicated. I mean, he was pretty lazy even when he was governor of the Bahamas. He played golf a lot, got drunk, didn't really do the job that well. And so it was a life of parties and golf and gardening.
Did you going through it, did he have any redeeming qualities?
He liked dogs.
like Hitler.
Exactly.
Was Hitler actually a vegetarian? Everyone says that as the thing.
Yeah, well, he was quite neat, I suppose. You know,
he was best. I mean, he had a certain charm, I think.
Yeah.
I talked to some people who met him when he was a child, when they were children, and he, in some ways, he related to them better than the adults. He would come into the kitchen and talk to them, and he was,
natural,
of course, he never had children. The dogs became their children, but he was I'm afraid, didn't have many redeeming features.
Was there much age difference between them?
No, only a few years. Yeah.
And so what were the last sort of few years like? What were they doing at that point? Where were they? In France still?
Well, they lived in France right through to his death in 1972.
Which part of France were they in?
Lived in Paris. Oh. They had, at one point, a country house in Antibes, now owned by Roman Abramovich. Oh. So they lived pretty extravagantly.
Yeah.
And then she continued in this huge house in the Bois de Boulogne until her death in 1986. But she had dementia. Oh. She was basically under the control of a lawyer called Maitre Bloom, who cut her off from her friends. And she really was just bedridden in this darkened room with bits of furniture being sold around her to pay medical bills. Oh. And all her friends kept away from her.
And were they still living together?
Well, they lived together till 72 when he died. And then, of course, she was on her own till 86. But again, the myth is that he died in her arms. The truth is that she didn't visit him in the last 2 weeks of his life, even though he was calling out for her, and her bedroom was next door to his. He died in the arms of a temporary night nurse.
Oh, God, I mean...
It's a sad story.
I don't know. You want to be sympathetic, but you just can't. Because you think, like, right through to the end, if he's still having a go, and it's not like he sort of realised during maturity, I've made a mistake and I was wrong.
You're looking for a character arc there. You're looking for some redemption.
Yeah. No, there wasn't much. No, he didn't. He to the end of his life. I mean, I think there's one story I tell where people were complaining after the Holocaust about the ways Jews were treated, and he said, Hitler did a pretty good job. And
it's not dementia or nothing. That's just his opinions.
That was his view. I mean, he felt he was German. I think he believed in strong government, and as you say, the trains running on time and all this. He was very anti-communist, and so that was understandable to perhaps be, to have those views before the war, but knowing what happened during the war continue is extraordinary.
What was her background? Is she just American? Did she have any German?
She came from quite a posh American background, but her father died when she was 6 months. She was brought up in genteel poverty by the goodness of rich relations. And so I think that was one of her searches for financial security and emotional security. And she married very young. So the first marriage was with a American Air Force officer who beat her up, and she divorced and was a drunk, and she divorced him. And then Ernest Simpson, who was the man she divorced to marry the Duke, actually was quite a decent man. And they actually continued to be in touch. He married her best friend, but they wrote letters to each other, and he was a sort of shoulder to cry on. Oh. He was happy to give the divorce because he had fallen in love with her friend. Oh. But I think she regretted leaving Ernest for the Duke. But she eventually overtook her.
Stability, yeah. I mean, so she wasn't but she treated him badly, but she didn't have the nastiness. It was
I think she was pretty nasty to the staff. She was pretty nasty to the little people, the people who served in shops. She was very self-entitled and really? You would think, given that upbringing, she would have some sort of sympathy towards people who weren't in a position of power. But I think she loved that position of power. She loved the wealth. She loved moving in these circles. Yeah. He'd given her access to this, which she wouldn't normally have had. So no, I don't think she was a very kind person.
Was there any stories about the affairs and things? I mean, you said there was a bisexuality in that for both of them, or just for her?
Well, there's a man called Scottie Bowers. There's been a big Hollywood series about him, and he was basically a pimp in Hollywood, who pimped for the Hollywood stars. And he has a whole chapter in a memoir he did, which I checked out with both the producer of the program and the ghostwriter, both of whom, of course, checked out with the stories. And the story is that they would come to the Beverly Hills Hotel. There were basically houses in the grounds, and both girls and boys were brought to them that they were bisexual. Oh. The Duke was certainly bisexual, and that was known even before he became king, and it comes in Chips Channon's diary. Nicky Haslam, who's a friend of theirs, a interior decorator, talks about it. So there are lots and lots of accounts of his bisexuality in relations. I mean, there's a suggestion he even had affairs with some of the equerries who worked for him. The evidence for her bisexuality, it comes down to Scottie Bowers and one or two other diary entries from people. So that's less clear.
What a marriage. I mean, did they no, they didn't respect each other, did they? It was just...
Yeah, I think they. I mean, you know, she stuck with him. He loved her. Yeah. It worked. It gave. You know, they were joined against the world rather than like Meghan and Harry.
Yeah, they got forced.
The siege mentality sometimes.
And then they basically need each other. Like they.
I think they seem to end up in a position where they were sort of stuck with each other, and they sort of
stuck with each other. Exactly. I mean, in fact, on the first day of the marriage, she came and sort of looked forlornly down at him, and they slept separately, and said, "What are we going to do with the rest of our lives?"
Yeah. Did she? So, when he died, was she still mentally there? Or had it kicked?
Yes, no, she was fine in 1972, but even then there were signs of
I'm just
dementia.
wondering, did she give any commentary on him? Like, was there anything known when he died? I mean, did she say anything? Did she write anything? Was there a diary?
There are letters to people where she talks about things. I mean, they both wrote autobiographies, but in the 1950s.
Yeah.
But even at as she came away from the funeral service and was flying back, she would say to someone, "Oh, you must meet David," which was his name. And of course he was dead, but she hadn't sort of come to terms with that. Yeah. So she was already getting a little confused, and that she hardly ate anything. She took to the vodka, which she drank out of a silver tankard. And so she declined pretty quickly. She had a series of falls. She went on one or two holidays with people. There's one I interviewed who had a huge house in the south of France. She stayed at that just after the funeral. But most of the time she was kept in isolation by this Maitre Bloom who controlled access to her.
Right. So when you were putting this together, did you enjoy it? Because it seems like a story of like misery.
Well, no, when George, dropped every time you found some new horror.
Yeah.
So no, I like rogue royals. I like people behaving badly. It makes much more interesting characters.
It's the thing I really couldn't get over is the fact of like it wasn't the usual. Well, they had a sympathy for the Nazis. It was, oh no, he's a traitor. Like at that higher level of the royal family.
Yes,
you think you wouldn't want to rock the boat. Like you're good. You don't.
Well, I think there was a sort of personal and political element to it. I mean, he did generally think they were a good thing.
Yeah.
One of his best friends in his life was Oswald Mosley, but I think also it was a way of getting back at his brother. So a lot of this was just to embarrass the brother and to try and he was looking for attention.
Yeah.
And this was, of course, a very good way of getting it. And
what was the age difference between him and his brother? Was it a few?
Only a few years.
Oh, just a few
and
years.
They've been very close. I mean, it's the same like William and Harry. Same thing. Very close brothers who are sort of torn apart by this woman coming in.
What was the biggest shock you found when doing this?
Well, I think that even when he had been sent to the Bahamas, that he was still communicating with these German agents and saying, "I'm ready to come back if I'm needed." So, and this is, the summer of 1940. This is Britain on the brink of surrender. Yeah. And then he gets to the Bahamas, and we have the Battle of Britain, which more or less begins as soon as negotiations with him break down. And he's complaining about the decor in the government house. And so when every spare penny's been spent buying these Spitfires, he wants, a new annex and some new furniture.
Was there much damage to sort of like the palaces in England during the World War II? You never really hear anything about it.
Well, Buckingham Palace was bombed.
Yeah,
and I mean, this is the famous line from the Queen Mother, "We can now look these 10 in the face."
Right.
So, I mean, and they could have easily, it was one wing which they were not in, but I mean, if it had hit another wing, they would have been killed.
Right. How did Windsor Castle come out of it?
Windsor was fine. Yeah, so, and I think that's why they spent a lot of time there.
Are you a fan of the royals? What side down do you come on?
I'm a monarchist. Yeah. I think they're a good thing, and William and Kate and Charles and all these people do a great job. The Queen, and I think the problem is there are these, say, rogue royals who spoil it for the others. Yeah. And in some ways, their stories need to be told. I mean, of course, the last thing they wanted these stories to come out, but it is part of our history.
And would you class Andrew as a rogue royal?
Yes.
Even now, yeah, he is already.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's the most polite phrase.
I thought, well, technically, I thought, well, no, look, let's just stop being silly. He is. It's just it hasn't fully.
It's not just the Epstein. It's his venality when he was trade envoy, where he looks like he was taking a cut. Of the commission. So this was government work that he was paid in a sense on government government expenses and taxpayers' expenses. I mean, we're still paying for his security now.
Well, what's happened to Fergie? Where's she now?
Well, she
pops up every now and again.
She's just bought some expensive houses in Mayfair. She's doing fine.
Oh, so she is here. I thought she'd gone to the States.
Well, she spends a lot of time in the States because, again, they love her, and she goes on Oprah and confesses to all sorts of things.
Oprah keeps popping up throughout the royals.
Oprah's a thread here, isn't it? I think someone needs to keep an eye on Oprah.
Well, I mean, it's she pays well. Yeah. She's got a huge listenership, and usually if they want to get the story, and she's always very sympathetic to them, and it allows them to reinvent themselves.
Did you say you are doing the Andrew thing?
Yeah, it should be out next year.
And what's the theme?
What's the threat?
Well, it's a full biography of both of them. Yeah. They've never been done together. There hasn't been a book on them for 30 years, and even those books aren't very good. So it's really going to tell the story of how they've made their money, how they lost their money at various times, his role in the Navy, his role as trade envoy, her charitable activities, etc. It's not. It's. I mean, to be fair, it's not out within the agenda, but clearly they are part of this tradition, and also it's looking at their marriage. An extraordinary marriage where they got divorced separated after 6 years and divorced, and yet still live together. Almost 40 years later.
I'm wondering in the back of your mind, are you just going to hold on from finishing the book for about maybe another year or so, just to see I don't miss anything? Because you never know with things.
I think the story keeps continuing.
Yeah, I suppose
we've got a musical on Prince Andrew coming out, and we've got two.
Is there really?
Sorry, a musical?
Yeah.
Yes.
What's that?
I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. And there are also two films coming out based around his Newsnight interview. So he's going to be in the news next summer.
I just imagine I'm not talking about just like a Les Mis kind of operatic kind of thing. I'm talking about Showgirls, Kick Tick.
I thought they'd probably go comedy, like they'd be mocking him slightly more than. It can't be a serious drama.
Springtime for Hitler.
Yeah,
that's what I'm thinking. It's everything. Epstein flights and stuff. I can see it all now.
Cartoonish personality. Well, that's quite interesting. So there's. I mean, I don't want to preempt, but I'm assuming there's going to be a Meghan Markle one in a few years' time as well.
Well, Meghan's been very well done by lots of authors. So and I haven't got access to her
the
circles.
Marriage and the whole thing.
Well, I'm sure there'll be other books about her because I mean she's not going to go away. I mean, my strength is the documents, and clearly as you get more and more contemporary, it's more difficult to find documents.
Yeah, of course.
So in some ways, I'd be happier going back in time and finding stuff where they're documents.
Is there any going back further than you've done now, or is it anything because you'd be going into the 1900s?
Well, all my books are about people born between 1870 and 1920. So I'm thinking of doing Prince Philip, for example, as a possible one, because I think, again, a very interesting figure, very important figure in the history of the royal family.
Because you're basically going to have to do a box set. I mean, it's going to be a box set, isn't it? It's going to be like that.
Strange Royal Marriages.
Yeah, with the name across the top. Yeah. Well, and I like just as a heading, the Scandalous Exile. That's fantastic. The Scandal.
Well, that's the publishers. They always would have put things like that.
It's not that hyperbolic, really. To be honest, it really isn't. It's apt. Yeah.
I mean, we haven't gone into the financial chicanery of the Duke, the fact that he was claiming on jewelry that he claimed to have been stolen, and then it was discovered at sales when they died. So he was caught with current black market currency stuff. I mean, the guy was a rogue.
So he really was sort of working angles. He was sort of hustling, kind of. He was really.
It almost doesn't seem
he had no
like
real boundaries, and I think the problem was he'd never been given boundaries.
Right.
I think that's the case with a lot of the royals, and they think they can get away with it, so they do.
Yeah, and they kind of do get away with it for the most part.
Obviously back then,
stories of Prince Charles today. There he is taking money rather dubiously from businessmen, offering honours, and then the story now is not all the money's been returned.
Oh, blimey. Was he head of any charities or anything like that?
Nope. I mean, that would be the obvious thing for him to do some. They gave a little bit of money to the American hospital in Paris, an occasional £100 here or there to charities run by friends, but they didn't really give money to charity. And they promised money to godchildren, and I don't think that ever materialized.
Even your kids.
And indeed to staff. One of the ways that they got away with paying the staff so little was they said, well, we'll remember you in our will. Most of them, of course, had gone by the time they died. But also, when it came to the will, there was no money for the staff.
Just lies and treachery and fraud and
scandal.
Scandal. Scandal, that's a very English word, isn't it? Scandal.
I think it's just because we associate it a lot with our governments.
We've had a lot of scandals.
We've had a lot in my mind, I think, of sort of Tory party scandal.
A lot of friends are moving to Italy because they feel it's less corrupt there.
Oh my! Wow, that's it's taken a few years, hasn't it? Really, unfortunately for that.
Who's the biggest outside of the English royal family? Who's the next biggest royal family in the world?
Monaco.
I
mean, in terms of interest,
Princess Monaco.
You know, with Grace. I mean, if you look at the papers, that's the coverage. The others very low key.
Yeah.
You know, but, I mean, Spain, of course, is in the news because King Juan has been forced out and is living, I think, in the Middle East, and there are lots and lots of claims against him. I mean, supposedly he slept with 1,000 women.
Who in Iglesias?
Okay, I mean, women, fair enough. Yeah. I'm like, okay.
Yes, I haven't told you about the other.
Well,
from when you decided to write this to when it was finished, how long did that take? When you handed in this,
the book came out in August 21, and my last book came out in August 19. So I took about 15 months. I mean, this is all, of course, during COVID.
You just went straight into another book.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I took about 4 or 5 months to write it.
Wow. Is that including research time or?
Yeah, the research is what takes time. Yeah. So the research went on really until the end of 2020. Okay. So about 15 months, and then about 5 months to write, and then there's a gap clearly between delivering it and when it comes out, which is delivered about May.
Where you just have to sort of rest in a dark room and just recover.
Well, I did continue to do research. I mean, the Royal Archives have been closed during COVID and actually opened. So that's where I began to go through the files. So, in fact, the paperback edition, which came out in June, is updated. There's even more stuff, new stuff there based on the Royal Archives research.
Okay.
Would you try and put in like a sort of happy spin? I don't like to end always negatively. The honeymoon. Was there anything? Was there a sort of minor whirlwind when there was love in the air? And
well, the strange place they went for the honeymoon was a house owned by a woman who'd killed 6 husbands.
That's a detail.
I'm starting to say, no, blimey.
So I don't know. What, I mean, strange place to go.
There's a book there just on her. What was the 6 husband?
Oh, it was a long time in the past, but it was a house in Austria. He liked going to Austria. He liked apple strudel. He liked dressing up in lederhosen, and that's what he did.
Don't know why I found that funny, but
because it's a funny image.
Yeah, the leder, too short. The shorts are too short.
I think there's a picture in the book of him in lederhosen.
And so, what else happened on the honeymoon? Was it a nice time? Was it?
Yes. Well, I think
the honeymoon was in Austria.
Yeah. I mean, it was only they got married in June, and in October they were off to Germany. So a lot of the time was spent planning their trip to Germany and talking to this man called Charles Beddoe, who lent them his chateau in France to get married, but in return for doing this trip. And he was a Franco-American businessman who did a lot of business with the Nazis, and it made him look good in their eyes. And of course, for the Duke, it made him look good in the eyes of Wallis to give her this, in a sense, this royal progression around Germany.
So the picture you mentioned before where they both jump in the air, which they literally do.
Yeah. Oh, amazing. They're pretty bouncy.
But I thought, I was going to say, why were they so sort of humorous? But it wasn't. It was like a utilitarian thing. It's the cameraman noticed that doing so paradoxically seemed to relax people.
So
I mean, that does not suit the people doing it.
But it's that thing.
That looks like a haunting. It's like a parrot.
Okay, he looks uncomfortable.
Yeah,
he looks uncomfortable. He looks like
he's in his suit and with the buttons done up.
Yeah,
I was going to say he looks uncomfortable. When
the pearls haven't moved. The earrings are.
He looks like that bit in Men in Black where the guy wears the other person's skin and it doesn't really work properly, and like he's all sort of like it's just his expressions are all awkward and weird. He looks like that. He looks like he's another person wearing his skin.
Tell you what, there's quite a sweet picture on the back cover. I mean, I suppose you want to end on a happy note. That's the look of love.
It's about me trying to think I don't like people being miserable their whole lives.
Well, some nice pictures with the dogs.
I keep thinking now that at least he's happy.
Yeah.
She's just.
Other people's relationships are always a mystery, and like what you never
it's
really
just
know
what
relationship people are like when they're alone together, and how people are in their inner lives and in their when they're in their very deep private part of themselves, their psyche.
Lots of old couples bicker and are still fond of each other, and I think they were just an old couple. They'd been, by the time he died, they'd been together 40 years.
I mean, that's a ghost picture if ever you saw one.
Yeah,
how haunting that is.
That's at the funeral. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
and I think I think she did realise afterwards that she hadn't perhaps behaved very well to him, and he was constantly trying to buy her love by giving her jewels and things. So it was all pathetic.
Yeah. So how old was she when she died?
1986, and she was coming up 90.
Oh, 90. It's been very well. The index is very good. Just some of them. Countdown to War, Phony War. What's the Phony War?
Well, that's that period really before the invasion of France in May 1940. So between September 39.
Now, why was it called the Phony War?
Well, nothing really happened.
Yeah.
Right, that was it. Yeah, it was just whether it was going to happen. We
declared war, and then there was no sort of not really large scale military action for a period, and it was sort of a bit. It was
under surveillance, murder in paradise. I think that's a Columbo episode.
That's the famous episode where Harry Oakes, the richest man in the Bahamas, was found murdered in his bed, and the Duke tried to cover up the murder because Oakes and the Duke had been in a financial scam together, and the last thing he wanted were detectives looking into that.
What do you think about them, having read it? What's your thoughts
about the couple?
Yeah.
Well, it's a sad, rather pathetic story.
Yeah.
They were clearly, I think I've made my case, and the reviewers, I think, have agreed with that he was not a dupe of the Nazis. He was an active intriguer with them.
Yeah.
And it shattered the myth of this great love affair.
Yeah.
And I think also it gives a new insight to the abdication and the way the royal family behaved to them. If you accept that he was maneuvered off the throne, and also that their attitude towards him was conditioned by his behavior during the war.
Yeah.
It seems from their actions, looking at it now, it seems from their actions that they were quite aware that, that the people making those decisions were quite aware of the situation in his viewpoint and the dangers of that, within the wider sort of political circumstances at the time.
Well, the fact that he wasn't given a job at the end of the war, no one could trust him. And they were just so worried about his associates, his lack of any sense of public service.
Yeah. Andrew, it's fantastic. Is it an audiobook version?
Yes, even read by me.
Oh, wow. Come on. See, that's great. I keep bringing this up, but you've got to read your own book. And I've said it before, it's only a little... When I went to download the Arnold Schwarzenegger biography, and he read it, and it was on iTunes, he was reading it. I thought, considering his money and the time it would take, and then I actually laughed out loud because I listened to it, and he spoke this first chapter, and that was it. He read the first chapter and the last chapter, just so on iTunes you hear the button. I laughed. I thought, he got me. He absolutely got me.
Well, sometimes you get an actor doing it. They can do all the voices and the dialogue.
Yeah.
And that's one of the difficult things when you're not a trained actor. How far do you do the voices and how far do you just read it like a story?
How long did it take to do the audiobook?
We did it in about 3 days. Normally takes 3 to 4 days, but it's...
But that sounds rushed.
Well, we were okay. Actually, it was okay.
3 days.
I did the last one. As you get more experience, it gets easier. But you sometimes don't know how to pronounce a word.
Right.
They have a little system where they can just check. It's fascinating.
Oh, okay.
And often, they'll go back and make you do another word again. But it's it's a very interesting experience.
Was that the first audiobook you done? I mean, in terms of speaking it.
I did them at Batten's.
Oh, okay.
But my book on Guy Burgess was read by an actor.
Yeah.
It's interesting because. Whereas the sort of script, the dialogue in the script is written to be read out loud.
Yeah.
Do you often is there something because words on the page like a sort of prose can sometimes not be as fluid to speak out loud, to sort of speak loud,
Well, the way I write the books is a bit like a film script. I try and have short scenes, move the scenes around so it's contrast, different points of view. I try and have a lot of quotes from diaries. They're all true, but from diaries and letters and interviews they've done, so that it feels like a novel. And then it's what I call taking the camera in and out. So you'll have a scene, a dramatic scene. You've got to picture it in your mind, but at the same time, then sometimes you have to come back the camera and give a bit of context to explain what's going on. What the history is. Yeah. So in some ways, it should read well, because it should read like a film script.
Yeah, I wasn't saying it was poorly written. By the way, I was just
no. But
there is a difference.
We don't,
between,
and I think I work in publishing, and I'm always encouraging people to take that format, and not to start the book not he was born on the 5th of November, but to find some episode that is revealing about their character or places them in some sort of jeopardy, then the reader wants to carry on. Because if you go to a bookshop, it's normally the first chapter that you read.
Yeah.
Did you do any acting or anything when you were younger?
Nope, not really. No.
You've got a voice for voice. Like you should have a vocal. What they call it when
I've got a face for radio.
No, your voice is like, as I was speaking, I didn't say it earlier, but when you were speaking, I thought there's so many things you could do with your voice. It's got its own. You separate the words correctly. You say that there's a nice fluidity. Some people don't have that sort of mellifluous thing with a voice, but you do.
Oh,
I think it's a secret
I could work
weapon.
For British Rail.
Yeah, or British Airways.
Get sorted. Yes, British Airways. Yes.
We were talking about you beforehand, because I always think I want to know why people ended up there. I'm always behind the curtain type of person. But just you're president of the Biographers Club. What is that?
Well, that was something I set up 25 years ago, and it was in like a mixture of a trade union for biographers, so that we could sort of campaign on issues like access to archives.
Oh, right, yeah.
But also a social group. So it started off basically with people just meeting for lunch to swap notes on, I don't know, archives, research, stories, whatever. And it's a pretty lonely thing if you're a writer. You're in your room the whole time. Right, and so it brought people together, connections, tips on how to publicize books, and then it sort of grew from there.
So it's not a sort of closed shop. A lot of things like podcasting, they're scared of each other. There's a community of biographers.
Yeah, and we'll swap notes. So, for example, I'll encourage them to come and do podcasts with you. It's all about networking and helping each other.
And you're the president of the Biographers Club.
Well, that's one of the perks of setting it up. Yeah. They kicked me upstairs.
I was imagining there's not many people that you'd have to run to. I mean, suppose you're the main guy. People are like, he's the real deal. Like he's the fella to ask.
Well, no, it's a sort of honorary position. I mean, there's a chairman now, and I'm totally out of it. I'm there if they want me. But at the same time, if we want representatives from the press to talk to the press about issues in biography, then that's an obvious place to go. Well, not me, but someone.
Oh, you went to Magdalen College.
Yeah.
What was that like? What was your time there like?
It was great. Yeah, it was great.
Where were you born?
I was born in Africa.
Oh, now I've got another 5 minutes to talk. Right. So so your parents?
My father worked for the government, and so I was brought up in Africa and then in Bermuda.
Right.
And then went back to school in Scotland. Never seen snow, and so I walked from.
When did you go to Scotland? How old?
I was 10.
Oh, okay, right. So that's 10 years.
So I went from running around barefoot to cold Scottish weather.
What do you remember of Africa? Can you remember it?
No, I don't. I remember Bermuda well, but not Africa.
What do you remember from Bermuda?
Well, just going to the beach, getting burnt, sailing. But my father had a job where he was a judge, and the Black Power had a target of 3 people that they wanted to kill. Mm-hmm. And the first was the governor, the second was the commissioner of police, and the third was my father. Oh, and they killed the first 2. So that's when we left.
Oh, you left then. So what happened in Scotland? What was the story there?
I just grew up in Edinburgh, went to school. And
how was your primary school lessons and things before the big school?
Yeah, well, I always read a lot. So I was always very interested in history, and always much more interested in biography than history. Yeah. So that's what I wanted to do, but I had a big gap. I did my first book in 1995, and then I did the next one in 2015. So I had a 20-year gap, and now I'm doing them every 2 years, so I'm speeding up.
Well, I love biographies. They're so they're so interesting, biographies. Is there any biography that you wish you'd written that has been done?
That's a good question.
Or I suppose, is there a biography that you've loved? That would be what's the main biographies of somebody that I loved that book?
There are lots of very good biographies. I'm trying to think who one comes back to. I read so many that actually I think
do they tend to be a sort of royal or
no? I mean, I was an intelligence historian originally, and then I found actually writing about the royals was even more difficult than the intelligence history.
Right. Yeah.
But royals are much more profitable, and in some ways, if you're going to spend time researching these books, you need to. And traveling the world, you need to have a return on it. I don't make money on the other books.
Right.
And you get a bigger readdership, which is nice, and television programs. And then you get called a royal expert when you know little as everyone else.
Are the books, because it's on Amazon, I suppose they're everywhere. Do you tend to know which countries are buying them?
Yes, we sell the foreign rights. So we sold the foreign rights here in Italy and Portugal.
Where do they tend to do best outside of England? The Americans, would they? I think they.
America for the right book. So we probably. I don't. Most of my books are quite British orientated, but I mean, clearly with Wallace being American, we'll see that the book's only just come out in America, and the paperback comes out in November. So we'll see if that makes does better than here. But the Burgess book was sold, for example, in Poland. The big market, if you can break it, is China, because of course it's so big. But I don't know they're very interested in royal biography, unfortunately.
And their censors can be a little pernickety about certain things that you wouldn't think that they would. I know lots of films, for instance, run into issues and get banned when you think that's very milquetoast. You know what I mean? It's very sort of bland or whatever.
And they're trying to. I mean, they were buying lots of children's books, and they're now trying to establish their own market with their own authors. So they're not buying outsiders. But yeah, exactly. It's weird. But the censorship here of stuff, again, stuff gets taken out if it's refers to the royal to the Queen, for example, even the most innocent things.
Yeah. Do many of the royals keep diaries? I mean, you don't. I know the Prince.
Well, the Queen is supposed to keep a diary. I think they probably do, but of course we're never going to see them. They'll be locked away, and maybe in 200 years.
Oh, well. Yeah.
Well, I mean, they meet the most extraordinary people. I mean, the book I'd like to read is a memoir of the Queen by the Queen, because think of all the people she's met over the last.
Because you really know nothing about her. Like you don't hear us. You hear her speak, but I mean,
you have no sense of her character.
Yeah, very occasionally.
But I mean, that's
only official. You're right. It's only official, but it's maybe the Queen's speech, at Parliament, and maybe like a speech, with the Jubilee. So she comes up, does formal things, but you never really.
I've got no idea.
You never see her relax. I mean, there are odd moments. I've just watched some programs on Fergie and Andrew, and there she is chasing the carriage. Like any mum would when her son gets married, and smiling and chatting. So you get a sense of that informality, but most of the time, as you say, you just get this very formal.
All I know about her is a selection of photographs. I don't know anything else.
Well, she's given one interview to a guy called Alistair Bruce, and it was very stilted.
In writing?
No, in person.
That was a few years ago.
Yeah. But I mean, we don't. Whereas, Prince Philip, which is why I'm so interested in him, was trying to modernize the monarchy. He was appearing on television programs in the 1950s. And he was much more open. Of course, he's the one who encouraged this program on the royal family.
Yeah, 69. That's the thing is, I get. When you say Prince Philip, I have a much more right or wrong. I have more of an idea of the man, of the individual, and the personality there. Partly because my grandpa met him and he was rude to him.
He's rude to everyone. So
he's like, I met pretty.
What did you call him? Slitty eyes?
No, he was rude. He worked for BA, and he was he designed cabin interiors, and they sort of had a new plane that they sort of had and the new interior, and they were sort of doing the royal tour and showing around, and he was just like going, "Oh, this is horrible. I don't like this at all. What, you designed this? Oh, what a load of rubbish." It's just like, he's like, okay, right.
So we'll end on BA as we started.
Yes, exactly. Everything always comes down to BA.
British Airways.
Another thread we need to check out.
I know. Andrew, it's fantastic. Thank you for coming in to Sunday morning. Thank you to our sponsors, Noble Water. Actually, Noble, it works. Noble Water.
Yes,
noble author.
Yes, you should have. You should
although they don't spell them right, they've gone for the modern version. What were you going to say?
I was going to say, in this wonderful book, The Traitor King, the Scandalous Exile, the Duke and Duchess of Windsor.
It's got America written all over it. That heading, all those. The Traitor King, the Traitor King.
And you were part of a fascinating documentary as well that is on Channel 4. I think it's on all 4 now streaming. So yes, I would check that out because it's really, really good.
And we will be back next week. Thank you, Andrew.
Thanks very much.
Here's your story, let's begin. The water's fine, come on, dive in. The future's here, it's right before your eyes. Step by step, you're on your way. You're welcome to a brighter day. Don't you know it feels good to be alive? You could be larger than